what do you think warfare is going to look like 10, 20, 50 years from now, and how is it going to change?
Yeah.
Not just specific to drones, but generally speaking.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to forecast. Like, I can't proclaim to know what it's going to look like. I do think the intermittent next step is going to be more akin to what we're seeing in Ukraine. I mean, just the operation the other weekend, where they probably one of the best special operations that will go down in history, in my opinion, with no like shooters in the sense that we were, where they forward staged in trucks the roof of a truck that would launch dozens of drones off of it and then go strike an enemy airfield and take out strategic bombers. I think that's one for the history books in terms of just like the complexity of a special operations mission, the rehearsals, the logistics, the people in place to smuggle something in, to pre-position it and have it to work that way, that mitigates almost entirely risk to force on the friendly side, in that example.
Yeah.
What an asymmetric opportunity. Something that, man, I hope we're paying attention as the United States in terms of like how these things are being used, how we can use them, but also the fact that that is just sort of the first chapter, the opening, whatever paragraph in the book of what I think is coming.
Yeah.
And so I think that kind of thing at a larger scale is going to really change our force protection posture. It's going to have to. How are we going to have layered defense from a counter UAS standpoint? And that's not, it's just like UXS also too, like, unmanned for whatever systems, undersea, surface, air. Are we going to get to a point where we have space? Probably. And so I think all of this is being reshuffled, and it's going to render a different use case for our strategic assets, how we park them. As we saw with the Russians, you can't just like park them fucking out there anymore. They're a great target, even for something that's not like an over-the-horizon, traditional missile that you just don't, that with almost no, attribution. It could be like non-attrib, and you don't know who did it necessarily. Yeah. Really, really complicated to figure out. So I think that's where it's going. And so if I had to sort of like forecast out further, I think we're going to have a lot of serious conversations about how we employ boots on the ground, when we employ them, when the enemy has these systems there. What's the place for SOF? What's the place for special operations? How do we interact in a battlefield like that? I think it's going to end up being us being nerd warriors, is how I think about it. I think it's going to be jack dudes that can still do day one, shit, but are enabled by technology and goggles and autonomous drones that are affordable and effectively as dispendable as a mortar round. Yeah. Like, we don't worry about picking up the mortar round after we shot it. I think these things are going to be the same kind of thing. And so I think if you just forecast that forward, a period of a couple decades, I think that's what it's going to look like. But I think there's going to be a huge rewrite of doctrine, TTPs, et cetera. I mean, how are the Rotary Wing guys going to adapt to this? When are they going to get approval? If we got a down man, everybody knows what we do. We call up Kazovac, whether that be ground or air, to come in and get our guy out. Like, that's what we do. Who's going to approve that now when our airspace is contested by these things that could have a mass casualty event?
Yeah.
I don't know if the ground force commander or whoever, the SOTA or whatever it is going to approve like, a 60 or a 47 or whatever the next gen thing is going in there when there's a high risk to that airframe and the flight crew and everybody on the ground of getting shot down in a contested environment. And so like, these are all things that we need to figure out that I don't have the answers to. But I don't think anybody has the answers to them yet. And so that's why I think it's of particular importance that we get ahead of it so that we don't try to figure it out like Jaedo, like after it's like obvious that like we have no mobility because there's IEDs everywhere. Right. It's like, well, these are maneuverable IEDs in whatever domain, because there's going to be unmanned ground vehicle IEDs effectively, aerial vehicles of all different form factors, all different command, det, autonomous, so on and so forth, flying around. Same thing in the ocean, same thing subsea. I think there's going to need to be a big rewrite in terms of how we project force and how we conduct our warfighting capability as a country. I think that's coming very soon.
Yeah. I mean, it makes me think of a couple of kind of worst case scenarios, specific to the first one being Rotary Wing, as you bring it up. Imagine a scenario like Somalia or any of the urban combat environments in Iraq and Afghanistan over the last couple decades, where, you know, there's, let's say, a dozen or 2 dozen $200 DJI drones with a couple pounds of explosives and some sort of accelerator liquid, you know, infused into it or whatever. And, you know, a couple of Blackhawks come in to fast rope on a rooftop and fucking 3 dozen drones attack it.
Yep.
Like, that's game over for everybody.
Game
you
over.
know? And that's not difficult for them to pull off at this point, you know.
It's actually pretty easy.
Yeah. The other one that, you know, the young man that was on with Mach Industries earlier this year, one of the scenarios he was talking about that was pretty frightening too, and I would ask, you know, as somebody in the space that's pretty well connected on both sides, both government and enterprise, is, you know, let's say China is still in international waters with a decent-sized vessel that has thousands of these drones on them, you know, that are not hackable, not jammable, pre-targeted for the White House or the Capitol building or the Pentagon or whatever, and they launch, you know, 10,000 of these miniature drones that just fucking swarm Washington, D.C. Like, are we prepared to deal with something like that as we sit here?
No.
I mean, how do we unfuck that?
I wish I knew.
I mean, that's terrifying.
I wish I knew. I've thought a lot about this. I've met a lot of companies. We invested in, you know, back when I was at my prior firm, we invested in a counter drone company, but that was an RF-based defeat system, which is part of what we need. We need, I think, a layered defense that includes and how do you scale that across every piece of critical infrastructure and into the Golden Dome philosophy. There's just, now it's not just ICBMs that are going to come up and over the top. It's that example that you just brought up. It's the example of what the Ukrainians did to the Russians really recently, but maritime-based and a shit ton more, right? So it's not outside of the realm of what's technologically feasible today. Actually pretty straightforward. Sure, you got to build a lot of these things, but it's not that complicated compared to other things. And so what do we do about that? Or does it become something that's sort of like the nuclear deterrence we have, where we got subs with nuclear weapons and it's sort of mutually assured destruction? Does this become part of the nuclear triad, but non-nuclear? I don't know, right? I think it sort of has to, in a certain way, where we need to have, there's going to have to be some aspect of that. But the frustrating part and the frightening part is any state and non-state actor, the technology is here and it's affordable enough for anybody to do it. Yeah. So how can you keep tabs on everybody? I know that back in the day, not that long ago, some of the tier 1 units were chasing around guys with Stinger missiles, right? We didn't want Stinger missiles around where we have airframes. Obviously, we don't want that shit shot down. Probably good mission set to find bad guys who have those things. Now we have the equivalent of Stinger missiles that cost $1,000.
And there's millions of them.
And a million of them. And you can do that. So what are we going to do? We just send around our tier 1 guys around the world to go find everybody with a hobbyist drone. And and we know from our time overseas, how easy it is to blend in and pretend like you're not a bad guy when you actually are. And it's just complicated. Yeah. So I think it's just going to be a frustrating period of time for us to grapple with what to do. Yeah. And the second we have something that negatively impacts our troops in theater or us here domestically is when we're going to do what Jaito did, build the MRAP and do all these things. But I just think we're going to put a lot of money after things and the enemy's going to find a way around it. Yeah. And it's going to have to be this constant game of cat and mouse. And I think it's all changing before our eyes.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that we don't do the too little, too late. Me too. Aspect of Jaito. But the third scenario that I thought of, and I'm curious because of what I do for a living and have done, especially as it relates to watching the Vector video, it made me immediately think of the use of dogs in a very similar capacity. Do you see drone technology, the way that you're working with the Vector program, eliminating the use or requirement necessity for dogs at all?
I haven't thought about that, but knee-jerk reaction is I don't think so. But I guess it's possible. I don't think so because I don't think that we have low-cost systems that have the sensory perception of a dog.
Yeah.
And it's probably similar to saying, like, when do these weapon systems take the place of people in its entirety? I think there's a place for them, right? Like, there's a place for them. And I just think that it just becomes more complicated. And so I don't know how it all fits together in the future or even in the midterm, but I know that we need to have a conscious effort towards fixing this and trying to solve it. But it's like anything else in life. Like, we might not ever totally solve it, but we're all on this journey of self-improvement. Like, it's not like I'm done tomorrow. Like, it's just like we're always trying to get better. And I think that's sort of the mentality that we need to have instead of saying, like, oh, there is this one widget, this one thing that's going to solve everything. That's not how life works. Like, we're just like on this like perpetual journey. And, if we believe that, like in the SEAL ethos, that we demand innovation, that's what we should demand every single day from ourselves to constantly get better. It's not like it's ever, our mission is never complete, right? And so I think that's part of it.
Yeah. I mean, as we're talking about it, the wheels turn for me. And I think if you look at the dog as a singularity, there's the two capabilities that it's providing predominantly are explosive detection and apprehension.
Yep.
Can a drone replace that? Not really. You could argue the apprehension side, where it whether
have they been replaced in like airports?
No, they haven't.
So if they haven't been there, then that's probably sort of a leading indicator because you have a static, fixed infrastructure that like you can fund, amortize over however many years, and like if dogs haven't been replaced in airports, it's probably further off than they're going to be replaced in the battlefield. In my mind. Well, so like if they haven't been replaced there, like the technology is not good enough to just be plugged into the fucking wall there to like replace them. Right. Probably not going to be downrange.
Agreed. If you're isolating that as an application in its current form operationally, but to me where it rabbit holes is saying, okay, well, the dog is an extension of the human component that's going in there in the first place. So if drone technology
humans aren't going.
Can mitigate the fact that humans even need to do it, then the answer is still yes. If whatever target complex you're talking about has shitbag A in it, and we don't even need to send humans. We can send drones that can positively identify them and then just level the building. I mean, there's so many different.
Totally.
Kind of, it's like the baseball hand game.
But I mean, how it goes. People always want a BDA. Like, when was the last time, even if we hit something without a human needed, like that we haven't sent humans to sort of like check it out and confirm and like, gather SSE. And so I think that unless the drones can do that at some point, but I don't know.
We've talked about the foreign policy aspect, the fact that we don't really have much of a response to some of these kind of worst case scenarios. If you dial it down to the more micro, just here in the United States, do you worry that drones will be used domestically, or do you see an increase from a law enforcement standpoint being used here in the United States, whether it's riot control or surveillance or even terrorist attacks here in the United States by not even necessarily homegrown, but I mean if you like you don't even need to smuggle anything in, you could. Have people just come here illegally or whatever and have a few dozen of them use a few drones apiece and attack schools. I mean, who knows? Like, is that a concern? Do you see any?
I think it's a matter of time. It's if not, or it's when, not if. It's for sure going to happen. And I'm not happy to say that. Like, it doesn't give me joy. I just think it's obvious how cheap it is, how easy it is. It's not hard, and I want to go through all the use cases because it's not like I'm a tactical genius, but you can come up with what they are in terms of mass casualty things, and then like what's our response to that? I don't think we know. I mean, we saw, frankly, when President Trump was shot, like I was just like some dude with a gun.
Yeah.
We haven't gotten the full scoop on that, which is something that irks me. But like, how much easier it'd be with somebody with like standoff of a couple clicks to come in and do that, and like there's nothing that's going to take it down.
Yeah.
That's not good. And so like that's just a single example. And so I think in terms of like law enforcement or public safety use cases, there's a lot of them, and I know that police departments have been like trying to do that. Their budgets are pretty constrained, and like it's pretty difficult for them to, historically, to get the budget to do this. There's a company that we tried to invest in, we missed it, and it recently got acquired. Would have been a great return, but they were great folks. I really like the founders, and they were building essentially drones for public safety use cases because a lot of these police departments are understaffed and they can't respond instantaneously to a 911 call, and many of which are false alarms or what have you. And so they essentially dispatch these drones, these unmanned aerial vehicles, to go out and get eyes on before a person could even get there, and relegate sort of like a next step. Hey, do we need people? Do we need cars out there? What's the situation? Or to track, so if there's a burglary, what have you, they could get eyes on and actually track the burglar versus them getting away. And so it was actually, the presentation was genius. It looked really, really cool, and the company was already bought by sort of an incumbent in the space for a really, really good price. But there's things like that are for sure coming, and it's sort of pretty apparent when you see the pitch. It's like, and you see that it's already being used by various police departments. Like, dude, this is like a no-brainer, like from a public safety standpoint. But also, there is some headline risk in the sense that some people are probably uncomfortable for a lot of the reasons we've talked about. Like, do we really want a machine in a surveillance state, going and doing that used inappropriately? We obviously don't. But if I would like that to respond. Like, I'm gone right now. My kids and wife are at home, and if the alarm went off, like, I know the cops are going to come because they have. When I haven't been home before, it's been just some false alarms. A kid trips in, whatever, and they show up. But it takes 20 minutes, right?
It's always when you're not home.
Yeah, always when I'm home. And so it's sort of funny, at least in hindsight. And so yeah, it'd be nice to sort of like get eyes on like pretty quickly. And I think those, just using our own sort of like prior experience in sense, like the faster you get eyes on, the better you can sort of like gather essay and make a decision. And so I think that's coming.
Yeah, that is neat technology, and I'm trying to think of reasons why I would be opposed to it, and I really can't think of any.
I can't think of any either.
Because I don't think it's a privacy issue if it's linked to a 911 call.
Correct.
I mean, to me, that's no different than a cop showing up.
Correct.
So now, if they were just saying, "Oh, we're going to do some recon by surveillance,"
routine patrol. This is just going around, and
like
to a
that,
certain extent, like depending on the situation, like maybe I'm okay with that. Like just like you're. I want my neighborhood to be safe.
Yeah.
I don't want packages stolen off my porch or any of that stuff. And so maybe no different than a cop car that's just patrolling. Yeah. It's a deterrent, right?
Yeah.
There's probably less criminal activity if you have like policemen driving around, because the chances of you getting dinged is probably higher.
Yeah.